Chapter 6 The Hunt of the Unicorn. There were 7 tapestries in all. Each was almost as high as the wooden ceiling. Jack read aloud from the sign on the wall under the first one. The Hunt of the Unicorn. Tapestries woven in Netherlands. At the end of the 1400s, the first tapestry showed hunters and hounds searching for a new unicorn. The second showed the unicorn being found. The other tapestry showed the unicorn trying to escape, leaping from the streams, chased by hounds, then captured in flame by the hunter's spears. Oddly, the last tapestries were tapestries showing the unicorn alive again. He was still sitting in the garden of flowers, surrounded by a wooden fence. There was a white, blue, and gold collar around his neck, and he was trained in the tree. "That's him," Annie said softly. "How can it be him?" said Jack. "He's a picture of the tapestry." "Read Merlin's poem again," said Annie. Jack unbuckled his briefcase and pulled out the parchment scroll. He read aloud. "The very last unicorn is now hidden well by those who have put him under a spell." "The unicorn is hidden in a tapestry," said Annie. "The people who wove it must be the one who put him under a spell." Said Jack. He read on. 4 countries, 4 decades. From that afternoon at the end of November before the blue moon. "Stop, do the math," said Annie. "Right," said Jack. He took out his notebook and pencil. "Okay, 4 countries is 400 and 4 decades is 40. Add them up. You've got 440. Then if you subtract here 440 from 1938, you've got 1498. "It works," said Annie. "The sign says the tapestries were woven at the end of 1400s, and it's the end of November. And Mr. Perkins said there's a blue moon tonight." "Oh man," whispered Jack. He kept reading. "He will wake once more and be free to go home if you call out his name, Divine Flower of Rome." Annie looked up at the tapestry. "Divine Flower," she called. Nothing happened. "Divine Flower of Rome," Jack called. Jack and Danny watched and waited. Nothing changed in the tapestry. It looked exactly the same. "Maybe he's not a right unicorn after all," he said. "Maybe it's just not a right name," said Annie. "Read the rest." Jack read more of the poem. "He must coax him to stand once his name is spoken. His chain will break, and the spell too be broken." He is a right unicorn," said Annie. "See, there's a chain." She pointed to the chains in the last tapestry. But why didn't calling his name work?" said Jack. "Why didn't he wake up?" "I don't know," said Annie. "What else does the poem say?" Jack read on. "Then a young girl must love him and show him the way, lest he be trapped forever on public display. If he loses his chance to rise and depart, all magic will fade from his horns and his heart." "He is on public display, and I'm the girl, Jack," said Annie. "I love him a lot. I'll show him the way." "Okay, calm down. First, we need to wake him up," said Jack. Voices came from outside. Jack moved to the window. He looked out into the courtyard. 2 people were coming through the courtyard, their heads down against the flying snow. One wore a dark cape and the other a tan raincoat. Jack turned back to Annie, a big grin on his face. "You're right. They found us. Teddy and Kathleen are here," he said. "They'll know how to break the spell." "Of course," said Annie, beaming. "Quick, let's hide and surprise them for a change." "In there," said Jack. He and Annie hurried in the long room of the tapestry room. They heard the door from the cloister open. They felt the rush of cold air. They heard footsteps. Jack and Annie grinned at each other. Jack put his fingers to his lips. Then a quick, nervous voice came from the tapestry room. Grinda, they are not here. I see that blunder, but look. Ah, is it him, Grinda? Annie grabbed Jack's arm. Bowler, Grinda, she whispered. Shh, whispered Jack. Of course 'tis them. 'Tis him, said the girl. I told you those Frog Creek brats would leave us to home. Get the rope, laddie. Aye, said the boy. Jack and Danny carefully peeked around the corner. They saw a girl and a boy standing with their back at them, facing the unicorn in the last tapestry. The boy held a thick black rope. Call out his name, Grinda, said the boy. The girl took the step toward the tapestry. She raised her arms in front of the unicorn. Thus, she called. Wind was rustled through the open doorway. The flowers in the tapestry swayed as if the winds were blowing them. The scents of roses wafted through the room. The unicorn moved his head. Oh, whispered Annie. Get ready, Bowler. Took him back to the master, said the girl. Annie clutched Jack's arm. Who's the master? She whispered. I don't know, whispered Jack, but I don't think he's a good guy. The girl turned back to the tapestry and spoke softly to the unicorn. Come, come, my lovely thighs. Stand up now. Come out of that old rug. The unicorn turned his head and looked out at the girl. To look in his blue eyes was accident, yet young, wise, yet innocent. He lifted his head as if he were about to stand. The girl nodded to the boy. The boy slowly coiled the black rope into the noose. The girl looked at the unicorn again. Come to me, disguised. Thus, she called, don't be afraid. I'll love you and show you the way. No, dear Thus, yelled Annie. Don't go to her. Annie and Jack bolted from their hiding place. Bowler and Grinda whirled around in surprise. They both had pale face and pale shining eyes. Leave him alone, Annie yelled at the strange pair. You don't love him. We love him. At that moment there was a flash of light, and the unicorn in the tapestry leapt like a deer over the woven fence. Bowler and Grinda shrieked and jumped back. Jack covered his face. Then there was silence. Jack looked up. The tapestry on the wall was unchanged. It still showed the unicorn woven of yarn changed into a tree, but standing on the floor of the museum was the most beautiful creature Jack had ever seen. Chapter 7. Dianthus. The unicorn had a bulk, milk white chest and graceful neck. A tuft of hair curled around his chin. A long sprawled horn rose from the middle of his forehead. He stood very still and very tall. His whole body seemed to be glowing. Bowler and Grinda just stared at him. They both looked frightened, but Annie stepped forward. Hi, Dianthus, she whispered. She reached out and gently touched the unicorn's white chest. Feel, Jack. Feel his heart pounding. Move away, ordered Grinda. The girl stepped between Jack and Danny. He is ours, and he is coming with us. He's not yours, said Annie. Who are you anyway? Said Jack. Where did you come from? Grinda glared at her. We come from the same magic world he come from, she said. He belongs with us, not you, Bowler. The boy shoved Annie aside and tried to loop the back rope around the unicorn's neck, but Dianthus reared up and whirled around, forcing Balor and Grinda out of his way. Then Dianthus leaped across the tapestry room toward the garden. Jack and Danny followed him through the open doorway into the snowy cloister. Balor and Grinda charged after them. They pushed past Jack and Danny to Danthus. Balor grabbed the unicorn's blue collar. "You are coming with us, stupid, like it or not." "Don't pull on him," yelled Annie, "and don't call him stupid." The Yanthus tried to back up. Let go," screamed Annie. "He doesn't want to go with you." "He had no chance," said Grinda. "As soon as that rope goes around his neck, all three of us will be instantly transported back to the castle of the Dark Wizard." "No!" Jack shouted. He charged at Balor and tried to grab the rope from his hands. Balor let go of the unicorn's collar and shoved Jack into the snow. Then he turned back to the unicorn and began to swinging the magic rope like a lasso. Dianthus reeled up again and kicked his legs. Breath from his nostrils billowed into the icy air. "Orion, Jack!" yelled Annie. "The Orion!" Kneeling in the snow, Jack yanked a book from his briefcase. He frantically turned the page, looking for the rhyme they hadn't used. "Call the cloud from the sky," he shouted to Annie. "Anything," she called. "Try it." Jack read the rhyme aloud. "Down from high, out of the sky, in a faint room lie." The thick white fog instantly filled the cloister. The fog was so dense that Jack couldn't even see his own hands. "Balor, where are you?" shrieked Grinda. "Here," the boy yelled. Someone grabbed Jack. He struggled to break free. "Let me go," he shouted. "It's me," whispered Annie. "Come on." Jack stood up, clinging to Annie. They stumbled together through the garden, feeling their way along the walkway. They came to the door that led to the main hall. "Dianthus, here," Annie whispered. Jack heard a soft crunch of unicorn's hoof in the frozen snow. "Where did he go?" Bella shouted. "Find him," yelled Glinda. Jack reached out and felt the unicorn's soft mane. Annie pushed open the door. Then she, Dianthus, and Jack slipped inside the main hall. Jack closed the room before Balor and Grinda could escape the garden. There wasn't a wisp of fog in the main hall. The museum lady was still behind her desk. She stared at Jack and Danny and the glowing unicorn that had just come in from the garden. Her mouth opened and then closed. Diantha stepped lightly over the wooden floor. Jack and Danny followed him. The museum lady never blinked. As Diantha walked gravely past her desk, she reached out and touched him. She gasped and quickly drew back her hands. "Thanks for keeping the museum open today," said Annie. "And thanks, Mr. Rockefeller, for his gift." The museum lady opened and closed her mouth again, still unable to speak. Jack opened the door that led to the streets. Jack and Danny followed Dianthus out of the museum and down the stone steps. The blizzard had gotten much worse. Snow had coming down harder than ever. The wind was wailing. The unicorn shook his head and knelt down. "He wants us to get on his back," said Annie. "Quick, climb down behind me." Annie climbed onto the unicorn's back. Jack climbed on beside her. Dianthus stood up to his full height. Grinda and Balor burst out of the door of the museum. "Stop!" screamed Grinda. Diantha looked back at him. Then he leaped nimbly over the snowdrift and headed into the darkening storm. Chapter 8. Back to Life. Jack clung to Annie. Diantha cleared the driveway of the cloister and began to run with ease down the street. His long strides were so light and graceful, Jack could hardly feel the movement. As the unicorn ran, he held his head high. His long pearl horn pierced in rainstorm, seeming to calm the winds and snow. Jack realized he could feel his fingers and toes again. His whole body began to feel warm. Diantha headed down the desert parkway along the waterfront, past an empty bridge. The bridge towers and cable formed a silver arch over the wide river. White caps swept across the water's surface. As the unicorn trotted past the river, the water became still. Diantha left the riverside and headed down the city streets. The wind whistled between tall buildings, blowing the snow into great drifts. But the unicorn's horns turned the howling winds into a soft breeze. The wild blowing snow became floating, star-shaped flakes, like snowflakes on Christmas cards. As the unicorn trotted down the street, snowbound taxis and streetcars started moving again. Lights came on in cafes and jazz clubs. Jack heard happy music coming from inside. With a calm, steady trot, the unicorn pranced on through the city. As he moved past old mansions, broken down tenements, and shabby hotels, people peeked out of doorways and windows to see why the sounds of the storm had died away. When they caught sight of Diantha with his horns shining in the windless air, they broke into joyful smiles. Church bells started ringing through the white silence. Finally, Diantha came to a stone wall bordering Central Park. He jumped off the wall and landed knee-deep in the head of snow. The unicorn leaped effortlessly out of the drift and centered over the fields and down the slope. Slowly the clouds parted, and light came. The setting sun poured down. "Hot corn!" the peddler shouted, plowing his pushcart through the snow. "Roasted chestnuts!" shouted another. A good smell of the corns and nuts filled the crisp golden air of the park. The unicorn trotted past Belver's castle. Bill Parkins stood outside, staring up at the clear blue sky. "Hey, Mr. Parkins, the monster storm's not coming," shouted Annie. The weatherman saw Jack and Danny on the back of the white unicorn. His jaw dropped. Then he smiled and waved. Jack and Danny rode on. When they passed the statue of the winged eagle, Jack thought he saw her move her great wings. "Did you see that?" he cried. "Yes," said Annie. When they passed the statue of Baldo, Jack heard a slow, dark bark. When they rode past the merry-go-round, Jack heard a chorus of neigh and wailness, accompanied by lively choral music. The Diantha pranced down the shimmering pathway. He leaped over the stone walls and centered over another field. The unicorn's horns glanced, and the snowy fields reflected golden and copper lights. Not until the unicorn came to a tree that hung the treehouse did he stop. Annie hugged the unicorn's long, graceful neck. Thank you," she whispered, and kissed him. "Yeah, wow," breathed Jack. Annie looked at Jack over her shoulder. "What now?" she asked. "I guess we climbed off," said Jack. "But then what?" Annie said sadly. "Where does he go?" "That's a good question," said Jack. "He come with us, of course," someone said. Jack and Danny gasped. Balor and Grinda slunk out of behind a tree. Balor carried the black rope. Jack was stunned. How did you get here so fast?" he asked. "We took the A train," said Balor. "'Tis actually a bit faster than riding a unicorn." The boy laughed meanly. "Shut up, Balor," said Grinda. Then she turned to Jack and Danny. "I'm glad you had a happy little ride, but you can say goodbye to Dianthus now. We will take him from here." "No, you won't," said Annie. "Stay away from us," said Jack. "Come on, Dianthus, let's go," said Annie. Before Dianthus could move, Grinda rushed forward and grabbed his collar with both hands. The unicorn snorted and shook his head. Grinda clung furiously at the collar. "Get a rope over his head, Balor," she yelled. "Now!" Balor looped the black rope into a noose again. The unicorn twisted and turned his head. Jack kicked at Balor. "Stop!" he yelled. "Get away from us!" Jack felt stupid, just telling and kick, but he didn't know what else to do. As Balor and Grinda struggled to get the noose over the unicorn's head, Annie pointed at them. In a loud voice she shouted, "Found full of air, appeared now here. Aka Mir, aka." The black rope fell to the snow. Balor and Grinda started to spin around. They spun like two spinning tops. They spun and they spun. They grew smaller and smaller. Jack saw the Balor of colors, gray and brown, green and white, a dash of orange, a dash of light yellow. The spinning slowly came to a stop. The two scary teenagers were gone. In their place were two small mirror ducks. Chapter 9. It's them! On one duck was gray with black and white markings. The other had glossy green hands and a rust-colored chest. Both had orange webbed feet and long yellow bills. "Quack, quack," they said. Annie looked over her shoulder at Jack. "I memorized the duck rhymes a while ago," she said with a grin. "I knew it would come in handy someday." Jack laughed. "Good work," he said. The two ducks waddled around on their brightly orange feet, quacking. Answering cries came from overhead. The flock of ducks were flying through the clear November sky. "Go on, Balor and Grinda," Annie shouted to the small mallards. Go with them now." The mallard quacked at Annie. "Go on," Jack chimed in. "Fly south for the winter. You'll have fun, we promise." The two mallards quacked and flapped their wings. First one and then the other rose off the ground. They flew high into the sky. Jack held his breath as he watched the mallard stroll away, flying south over New York City. Annie put her arms around the unicorn's neck. Then she rested her head on his silky white mane. "You'll safe now," she said, "but you have to live. I have to show you the way to Camelot. The problem is, I don't know how to do that." "Ogre, ogre." Jack looked over at the avenue that bordered the park. The big yellow taxi was parked by the curb. The driver was honking his horn. He waved through the window. "What's that guy want?" said Annie, sitting up. I don't know, said Jack. The driver jumped out of the car. He wore a cap and a plaid scarf. Hey, it's the same driver who dashed us out of the clusters, said Annie. The passenger door of the taxi opened, and the girl stepped out. She was wearing a purple shawl, and that's the girl who told us to get off at the wrong subway stop, said Jack. The taxi driver and the girl in the shawl both waved at Jack and Danny. Then the driver lifted his cap and pulled down his scarf. He had red curly hair and a wonderfully familiar grin. The girl pulled the shawl off her head. Beautiful long black curls fell down to her wrists. It's them, said Jack. Teddy, Kathleen, Annie shouted. Jack and Danny slid up the unicorn's back onto the snowy ground. The young enchanters ran across the snow to them. Annie threw her arms around Teddy. Kathleen threw her arms around Jack. The four of them laughed and talked at the same time. That was you! That was you! That was us! I'm sorry I told you to get off at the wrong stop, said Kathleen, but Teddy was waiting for you there. And I'm sorry I left you stranded in the storm, said Teddy, but I knew you'd find your way to the clusters. We thought you guys are the two kids following us, Bella and Glinda, said Annie. Yeah, we just saw you turn them into ducks, said Kathleen. Brilliant. Where were they? asked Jack. Our parents of the Dark Wizard, said Kathleen. We didn't know they were following you. Even Roland didn't know. They were pretty creepy, said Jack. Yeah, but they actually helped us without meaning to, said Annie. They knew the unicorn's name. We thought it was Davin's Flower of Rome, said Jack. I told Merlin that clue might be a bit difficult, said Teddy. Divine's flower is a dianthus in Latin, the language of old Rome. So, do Glinda and Bella knew Latin? asked Annie. Hardly, said Teddy. The unicorn's name is famous throughout the other world. He is known for his great magic and for his goodness, added Kathleen. We know about his goodness, said Annie. When he ran through the streets with his horns in the air, the blizzard ended, and everyone we passed cheered up and seemed to get more hopeful. The Dark Wizard was trying to capture Dianthus so he could keep the unicorn's good magic from the rest of the world, said Kathleen. Merlin will be very pleased that you have foiled the wizard's plan. In truth, I believe he would like to thank you himself, said Teddy. He turned toward the yellow taxi parked at the curb. The back door of the car opened, and two grown-ups stepped out. A tall, legend woman wearing the wine-collar clocks, and a man in the dark blue robe. The man had a long white beard. The woman had long white hair. Morgan! Merlin! whispered Jack. As the wizard and magical librarian of Camelot walked across the snow, the Dianthus stepped forward to greet them. He bowed his head. Merlin tremblingly stroked the unicorn's white neck. Morgan Le Fay turned to Jack and Danny. Hello, she said, smiling. It is good to see you both. Her lovely voice washed over Jack like music. You too, said Annie, hugging the enchantress. What are you and Merlin doing here? Jack asked. I have always wanted to visit New York City, said Merlin. Teddy has just given us a quiet ride in the taxi. Merlin had to tell him to slow down several times. Morgan laughed and turned toward Merlin. Quite a ride indeed, said Merlin. Greeting to you both, Jack and Annie. Greetings, they said. Thank you for saving my ballad Dianthus, said Merlin. Long ago, he was stolen from Camelot by Endors. He was rescued by magic weavers in the Netherlands. To keep him safe, they used their art to hide him in their tapestries. I knew I could entrust you both to set him free, and the day and spell was to end. But your mission turns out to be more dangerous than I intended. I did not know the Dark Wizard has sent his apprentices to follow you and capture the unicorn. Poor Grinda and Balor, said Annie. Now they're stuck. Oh, do not worry, said Teddy. The spell we're off in a few days, and they'll find their way home. Yes, said Kathleen, and I am sure the Dark Wizard would have some other wake plan for them. Aye, said Merlin, but they will never longer have to use their black robe. He picked up the robe from the ground and handed it to Teddy. Take this back to Camelot and see that it is destroyed. Gladly, said Teddy. It must be terrible to work for the Dark Wizard, said Annie. She looked at Merlin. I'm glad we work for you instead. Merlin smiled. And so am I, he said. On your last 4 missions, you and Jack have proved you know how to use magic wisely. And for that, I now entrust you with one of Camelot's greatest treasures. Merlin pulled the scroll wand from his robe. I gave you a wand of Dianthus, he said. As you can see, the wand is made of shape of the unicorn's horn. It had a bit of his magic in it. Merlin had a silver wand out to Jack and Danny. Jack took out the wand from Merlin. It burned in hand, with cold or warmth. He couldn't tell which. With the help of wand, you can make your own magic, said Merlin, but you can only use it after you had tried your hardest, said Merlin, and remember that it can only be used for another's good. Well, remember, breathed Annie. Thank you, said Jack. He unbuckled his briefcase and carefully placed the silver wands inside. We must leave you now, said Merlin. He turned to Teddy and Kathleen. You may ride Dianthus home to Camelot. I will be alone shortly, but first I would like to drive that taxi around New York City myself. Morgan, will you join me? Indeed, said Morgan, but drive it more slowly than Teddy, please. I promise nothing, said Merlin. He looked at Jack and Teddy. Good evening to you, my friends. I will call for you again soon. Bye, said Annie and Jack. Merlin took Morgan's arm, and the two walked back to the taxi and climbed into the front seats. The big yellow car splattered them and then took off wildly. As it skirted up the avenue, Merlin blew its horn. Oh God! Oh God! Chapter 10. The Wand of Dianthus. Jack, Annie, Teddy, and Kathleen laughed. My, said Kathleen, I believe I would much rather ride Dianthus than go with Merlin. The white unicorn knelt in the snow. Kathleen and Teddy climbed onto its back. Dianthus stood up. Teddy smiled down at Jack and Danny. You know, 'tis a very great honor to be given the wand of Dianthus, he said. I know, said Jack shyly. Thanks for getting us to the right place at the right time today. Hey, where are you guys in Venice looking out for us there too, said Annie. And Baghdad and Paris? The two young enchanters looked at one another. Then they nodded their heads. We knew it, said Annie. Thanks for helping us, and thanks for the book of magic rhymes, said Jack. You are most welcome, said Teddy. And now we must go. We hope to see you again soon. Goodbye, Dianthus, said Annie. She stroked the unicorn's neck one last time. The Yankees lowered his head and stared at her with his soft blue eyes. They sparkled in the last bit of daylight. Annie stood on their toe and whispered in the unicorn's ear. Then she stepped back. The Yenta started. He raised his head. Then he leaped forward. In a flash of silver, the unicorn and his two riders were gone. Standing in the cold dusk, Annie stared silently into the distance. "What did they say to him?" asked Jack. "I told him he had to go with Teddy and Kathleen," Annie said. She blinked back tears. "I told him that would show him the way home now." "Oh," said Jack. He pulled his hands on Annie's back. Don't worry. We'll see Dianthus again someday. I just feel it." Annie smiled. "You're starting to feel this sounds like me," she said. "Uh-oh," said Jack. He shivered. Nat was falling fast. "Ready?" "Sure, let's go," said Annie. She smiled Jack to the treehouse and up the rope ladder. They climbed inside and looked out the window. The lights of New York City were starting to come on. A full moon was rising over the snow-covered park. "Hello, blue moons," said Jack. "Goodbye, blue moon," said Annie. Jack picked up the scroll from Merlin. He pointed to the words Frog Creek in Merlin's note. "I wish we could go home," he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. The cold wind blew through the Frog Creek woods. A few fat snowflakes drifted into the treehouse. Jack and Danny were dressed in their own clothes again. Jack's briefcase had turned back into a backpack. Jack quickly opened the pack and looked inside. "Good," he said. "The ones of Dianthus is still there." "Should we take it home with us?" asked Annie. "I think so," said Jack. We can keep it safe until our next mission." He pulled Teddy and Kathleen's books of rhymes out of his pack. "I guess we could keep our book of rhyme as a souvenirs," Jack said. "We won't be used in any more since we've used up all the rhymes." He stuffed the book back into his backpack. "We hadn't used all of them," said Annie. "We still have one left, remember? Find the treasure you must never lose." "Oh, I already used that one," said Jack. "Come on, let's go." He grabbed his pack and started down the rope ladder. "What do you mean you already used that one?" Annie said as she followed him down. "When did you use that rhyme?" Jack stepped onto the ground. "How do you think I found you when you get lost in Central Park?" he said. "Well, you thought I was a treasure?" "Wait, you thought I was a treasure?" said Annie. Jack shrugged. "I guess," he said. "At least today I did." Annie smiled. "Cool," she said. "Thanks for finding me when you get lost." "Not me, you," said Jack. "You're the one who got lost." "No, you," said Annie. "You," said Jack. You, said Annie. Jack laughed. "Whatever," he said. "Let's go have some of that hot chocolate." The snow began to fall harder as the cold wind rattled the bare trees of the Frog Creek woods. Jack and Danny hurried home.